Bit of a sticker shock going back to the office, eh? What expenses are up? How bad is it? And what can you do about it? Ted's here to talk about it, starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Well, Ted, this is a rare Wednesday morning recording session.
What is happening here?
I know, the world is just topsy-turvy. Well, what happened was, on Monday, I was sitting in my office here, you were sitting across the hall, and I leaned over and said, "Hey, Ted, what do you want to talk about on the podcast?"
And you took me at my word.
Right, and you actually had an answer. You said, "Oh, I got an idea. We should talk about this." And I'm thinking, oh boy, so we're getting close to episode number 400. I've never asked you what you want to talk about before.
You know, that's true. You never have.
Never have, so I guess from now on, you get to pick the topic.
It's a dangerous trend.
It is. So what is the topic you would like to discuss today?
Well, I want to discuss the sticker shock that people are going through, realizing that their expenses have changed going back to work.
And we're going to make this fun. There's no cue cards for Ted. So it's his idea. He doesn't need cue cards.
We're just going to wing it.
So, okay, so the sticker shock. So, okay, give me some stickers that are giving people shock.
Well, I'll tell you the one that's upsetting the most people. You may not recall this, but April 2020, right after all of the fun started with the pandemic, people were locked down. No one was going anywhere. It was probably 85 cents a liter to buy fuel. And that's because just nobody was buying it, so the price just collapsed. Well, when I drove in this morning, the price was $1.74.99 for a liter of regular. Well, that's a hell of a change.
That's like double, isn't it?
That's more than double.
More than double.
Right. Now, the 85 cents that we're starting back in April of 2020 wasn't really fair, because before the pandemic started, what was fuel? Probably
closer to $1, a little over $1.
I think it was $1.20, somewhere in that neighborhood. But still, if you were comparing the $1.20 now to the $1.75, what is that, a 40% increase? It's just an insane number. But the real shock is going from that, so now gas is free, and no, it's not free anymore. You're paying more than double.
And during the pandemic, you weren't going anywhere.
Right. So, the basis for this whole topic really is that it takes people, 30 days to change a habit? Well, and so we've had 2 years now of changing our spending habits. So it used to be you knew how much you had to budget to get your fuel in your car to go to work. You knew how much you had to budget to buy lunches, clothes, haircuts, all the stuff associated with having a job in the workplace instead of from home. We've had 2 years of not spending the money that way. And so we found other ways to spend our money. And suddenly a big portion of the population has got to revert to the way they used to spend. And one, you can't switch your spending habits overnight. And two, the prices for all those things they have to spend money on have gone up.
So to go to work in your car takes, a tank of gas a week or whatever it is.
Yeah, let's just use that as an example.
So tell me in dollars then what it means to go from 85 cents to $1.74 if you are driving a typical kind of car.
Well, you often drive your son's Civic.
I'm driving it today, as a matter of fact. Yes.
And so before the pandemic hit, or right at the beginning of the pandemic, it probably cost you $45 or $50 to fill the tank. And now it's going to cost you $85 to $90 to fill that same tank.
So that's potentially another, and that's a Honda Civic, which is a small car with a small...
I've got a sport ute because I've got the 3 girls still in school. So, when I filled the tank last weekend, it was $145 or something insane.
So if you're a tank a week person, it can easily be another $40 or $50 a week now.
Right. Well, and put it this way, before the pandemic started, when people were working a normal, go to the office kind of job, most of the budgets we saw, people had budgeted $200, $300, maybe even $400 a month for fuel costs. So during the pandemic, when they weren't going anywhere, $100 a month for fuel costs. So now you're going back to work. You can't go back to the $400 because the price has gone up. It's probably $500 or $600. So it's just an incredible change for people in a very short period of time.
Well, and we know from our Joe Detter study that our typical client has take-home pay of around $2,600 a month.
Right.
$200 a month of gas cost increase
eats up all the extra money they ever had to service their debts.
And that's one cost.
That's right. And the only reason I'm using fuel is because it's so obvious. Every time you're in your car and you're driving along, it's, my God, look at the price of gas.
Well, and fuel is built into everything.
That's right. There's a ripple effect.
So, so talk about where the ripple goes then. So
let's, how do you want to deal with this? So let's take the cost of milk. Mm-hmm. That's something everybody buys, or most people buy. So 4 liters of milk before the pandemic started was $4. In January this year, it was $5, and I'm pretty sure on the weekend when I was shopping, it was $5.89.
So again, you've gone from 4 to almost 6.
Right. And so part of that, built into that, is the increased cost of transportation. And so the gas prices that have doubled for you and I at the pump, well, they've also doubled for the farmer. So diesel's up the same way, and that the ripple effect goes through the entire basket of goods that you buy.
Yeah, and the cost of food, the fuel cost has gone up, but there's other stuff going on in the world at the moment.
Well, you might that. What's the Russian term for the little activity in Ukraine?
Yeah,
it's not an invasion or a war.
We're just showing up to say hello. We're liberating you or whatever.
Right.
Well, and I mean all the supply chain issues that we've had for the last couple of years, and boats running aground and everything else, that's also increased all the costs of that.
Yep.
So I'm paying a couple $100 extra for gas, while my food bill might have been just as high or higher than what my fuel bill was.
Yeah, I think with food, it's kind of a strange transition. So you were buying groceries, and you had to buy additional food because you're packing your lunch to go to work. Well, so you're working from home, so you still had that same food, but I think your cost probably dropped a little. Unless, like me, you put on 20 pounds because you were snacking too much.
20 pounds! Well, in fact, I can tell you that I weigh exactly almost to the pound what I weighed back at the start of March 2020.
You're doing better than me.
Well, except if you draw it on a graph, there was a bit of an uptick, and then I've been working on bringing it back down. But yes, you're absolutely right. So what I do, I get up in the morning and I make my eggs and whatever I'm going to throw in it and bring it to the office.
Right.
When I'm working from home, it's like, oh, well, is there any leftovers from last night? I can use those. I mean, I can bring those to the office too, but everyone gets offended when I bring last night's fish to the office and put it in the microwave. So, and I think a lot of people, if they're in the office, is like, okay, well, I don't want to be making lunch before I leave. I'm going to zip over to the, Timmy's or whatever and grab something. And if you're in an office tower, you go down to the food zoo. It's certainly more expensive to buy something, at a food place than to make it and bring it yourself.
Yep. Well, and then there's another side of this as well. I mean, I've got 3 school-aged kids. They were eating at home for 2 years, year and a half anyway. And now we're buying the things we need to pack in their lunches. And so that's an increased cost. You just got used to not spending the money. It's not that you've got to spend the money. It's you got used to spending it someplace else. Your habits changed, and now they're being forced back into a pattern very quickly, and it takes time to adjust. Now,
it's been a long time since I had to pack a lunch for my kids. Probably never, because I'm assuming my wife always did it. But I recall when they were little, you could get these prepackaged things that, maybe had some crackers and some cheese in it or some whatever.
Yeah, they're horrible for you, but anyway.
Yeah, they're clearly not good. But if you're throwing it in a lunch bag, which is going to get thrown in your locker, and it's that costs more than to make a sandwich at home, I would assume.
Exactly. And for whatever reason, when they're eating at home, I mean, they're eating what's available in the fridge, but when you're planning a menu for them to take to school, it's a different kind of purchase. Or, as you say, they're going out, so.
Yeah, either way. Well, and I know our office here in Kitchener is right across the street from a high school.
Yes.
And if you go out our front door at 11:30 in the morning, which apparently is when the lunch period starts.
Nutrition break.
Nutrition break. There's a horde of kids walking to either the store here, the hamburger place there, or Timmy's there.
That's right.
So obviously that's a cost that they're incurring that they weren't incurring when they were at home. So, okay, so we've talked about gas, we've talked about food. The other thing when you go to work is you wear clothes.
Right.
So I guess if you put on 20 pounds, there's going to be a cost to getting your pants adjusted. If nothing
I'm not going to hear the end of this, am I?
No, you're not. But look, when you're working at home, wear whatever you want. Doesn't matter.
Well, there are all those stupid commercials where people are in Zoom meetings in their, in their underwear with a business shirt on.
Yep.
You can't get away with that in the office.
No. Well, and that's why we keep the camera level here so no one knows what pants we're wearing here. Yeah, we're both wearing pants today. I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. Well, another huge one is daycare costs.
Oh, sure. Enormous.
So if your kids aren't going to school, if you're working from home, if they're homeschooling, well, okay, I don't have to do the before and after care because I'm there anyways.
Yep.
And I mean, sounds
assuming you can actually still do your job,
right?
But that's
exactly.
A conversation.
But if during the pandemic, there were a lot of people who were laid off. They were getting CERB, getting EI, whatever. So okay, my income perhaps dropped, but my cost for daycare, transportation, all those other things cost. And daycare is a huge number.
And there's another side effect to all of this as well. So a lot of those people got pushed out of jobs because no one was using the service, and now they can't attract workers back to that industry. The wages have to go up because nobody wants to do that job.
Yep. Yeah, in the past, it was like, well, that's the way we always did it.
Right.
It was just the way we did it. Well, now it's like, okay, I was able to, stay at home, work from home. If I'm not paying for transportation, clothing, lunches and daycare, I don't need a full-time job. I can work a part-time job and, cover daycare with my spouse, my in-laws, whatever, and be in just as good a position, maybe even better.
Well, you've learned to live differently.
You've learned to live differently. Yep. I think that's exactly right. I guess there's other things too. I don't know if car insurance went up or down during the pandemic.
It's been going up recently.
But during the pandemic, there were some companies that gave people a bit of a break.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion and argument on whether or not they should have been giving everybody a break because the cars weren't moving. There was a couple of the big players, gave people 10 and 15% rebates, but most of them didn't. So it just stayed the same, and now they're increasing.
Yeah, because now you're back on the road again.
Right,
so,
and everybody else is increasing, so we can increase too.
Yep. Well, and I think you already mentioned things like haircuts, which I clearly need on this broadcast here. But if you're working from home and the place you get your haircut is closed,
well, how many people grew beards during the pandemic?
Yep, I did.
Yeah, yep. I didn't because it drives me crazy.
And it eventually drove me crazy, and it was gone. But we all got used to having longer hair,
right?
And we all got those electronic things, and I'll just try to trim it myself. And if you're not going out, and no one's going to see you. Who cares?
To make? Yeah.
But certainly, there's a lot of people now who've just decided, I'm just going to leave my hair gray. I don't need to get it.
Well,
colored.
And so now we've got the same problem with that grooming industry that we're having with daycare. People have gotten used to either doing it from their homes on the side or doing without it, or certainly doing with it less frequently. So the industry has changed.
Yeah, if I was a hairstylist before, working in a salon and having to, share my revenue with the salon to pay for the chair and to pay for everything else, and now I can just have people come over to my house and I'll cut your hair on the driveway. I only need to charge half what I was charging before, and I get to keep it all.
Yeah.
We
won't even talk about whether or not it's a cash transaction.
Well, or whether it's legal. Or I'm sure everyone's paying with Bitcoin. It's
they are.
Perfectly fine. Okay, so let's talk then about who is getting screwed. I don't know if that's the legal term for this, but
well, we can beep that out. Try it again.
Yeah,
who's getting it? I'll go
beep. Who is being beeped here? There we go. As a result of this whole transition,
it's like everything else that ever happens in the world. So the people that are in some sort of technology job that are in high demand, the employers pay for the changes that they want to keep these good employees. The average person, so the person working in a clerical job, some kind of admin role, in a job where they have to be at the place where they're working to service their customers, those are the ones that are getting impacted. And almost always those are folks at moderate to lower income levels.
Yeah, the person who works in a factory cannot do that from home.
Right. You can't make a school bus brake assembly from your living room.
It's just not possible.
Can't be done.
Whereas if you're a knowledge worker, sitting at a computer, okay, I can answer the phone and do data entry and whatnot from the office. So you're right. There's a segment of the population that benefited by this.
Sure.
This is great. And then there's a segment who gets absolutely hammered by it.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to previous shows, but the population is really divided into three. There's the folks that are really well off. The pandemic hasn't hurt them. In fact, it's probably benefited them. We got the folks in the middle that always just managed to get by. The world is okay. They had to make changes, but they probably used the pandemic to pay down their debt and do some things they weren't able to do before, but now they're going back to normal. Then we got the bottom third that have always been in trouble. They had too much debt going into the pandemic. They ended up on CERB instead of working. CERB was cut off. They're getting back to work, or some of them got back to work on a slower basis. Their incomes are lower, or worse. Their incomes are the same, but now all their expenses are higher. The bottom third is always the one that gets kicked in the teeth.
Yeah, and I think we saw during the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, the people at the very bottom actually benefited because instead of getting $1,500 at my minimum wage job, where I was only getting 25 hours a week, but I still had to pay for bus fare and everything else, CERB was actually better.
Well, CERB was better short term. The tax bill hasn't come in for all those people yet, and
right.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, the 2020 tax bill was there for a lot of people. Now people are filing their 2021 taxes.
Yep.
So there may be 2 years worth if you got CRB, which only had 10% taken off.
Think back to our Joe Debtor study. The one thing that has gone up for everybody was the amount of tax debt.
Yep.
In both the number of people and the actual amount of money they owe.
Yeah, in 2021, around 40% of our clients had tax debt at the time they filed. Traditionally, it's more like a third.
Yep. And it was about $2,500 higher.
Yeah, and that doesn't include the 2021 tax liability.
Right.
Because we're now in the process of getting it filed. It'll be the summer of 2022 when that really becomes obvious, and it'll be an issue. I mean, we talked about daycare and everything, and that's something that probably disproportionately affects women as well.
Certainly.
That their jobs were, okay, sure, you can work from home, but like you said, you got to watch the kids too because they're homeschooling.
Right.
Well, I can't really do my job at home when I'm also doing that and taking care of this and taking care of that.
Yep.
So I think in a lot of cases, they ended up getting disadvantaged by it as well. So, okay, so the next logical thing in the thought process then is, I am a knowledge worker. Mm-hmm. I have been able to work from home. Now I'm coming back to the office. I kind of liked working from home. I obviously was able to save money. We just went through the list.
Yep.
Should I be thinking about getting a job where I can work from home permanently? If my existing employer doesn't offer that, is that something I should be considering?
Yeah, I know I'm in the minority with this. I don't think the remote working trend is going to be for the entire population. It's going to be with us for long. I think it's more likely that we're going to try and switch to a 4-day work week for everybody, but those 4 days are still going to be in the office. I think that's where we're headed, but be that as it may. If you use the opportunity now to change employment, to make a dramatic or a large change in your life, just understand there's always risks when you make that kind of change. Think back to the folks that decided they'd sell their houses in Toronto and move to the suburbs because they were working remotely, and now they got to go back to work, and so now their fuel costs are going through the roof. They made, in what my opinion was, a bad decision. If you were going to switch jobs, you just got to weigh all of the risks. So you've been with this employer for 5, 6, 7 years. You got enough seniority that you're reasonably secure. You know your job. You know what you're doing every day. You switch to a brand new job. Okay, great. Hopefully you get a raise because that's often what happens when you switch jobs. But now you're on probation for 3 to 6 months. You don't really know what this new job is going to be like. And there's what happens if the pandemic happens again? There's some kind of flare up and they say, well, sorry, anybody hired in the last 6 months has got to be laid off. They're the ones that go first. It's a very risky thing to do, to switch jobs simply because you're trying to work from home more often. I guess that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you make a key point that the longer you've been at a company, the potentially less valued you are. Yeah. Like if you work at a big bank and you've been there for 20 years, okay, you've been getting your 2% raise for those 20 years, but you've been in the same role. You're the manager guy. And so you haven't advanced on the ladder. Whereas if you now go to a different bank or an insurance company or something, you may see a big bump in your pay.
Right.
So that would be the argument for looking
switching
for
jobs.
Another job. But you're right. You go there and you're the new guy there.
Yep.
And we don't know who you are. There's nobody who has your back. You don't have a manager you've worked for a while. And
yep.
You don't really know the routine. So, okay, my kid is sick. Am I able to slip out a few minutes early, or how does that work, or whatever? And you're right. I mean, I disagree with you on the fact that I think the world has changed.
Yep.
So, yes, there are absolutely some jobs that have to be performed at the company. Like you said, you can't make brake assemblies or
anything in manufacturing or direct client service.
Yeah, if you deal across the table with people, I mean, if you're a bank teller,
right,
you can't do that remotely because the guy coming in to deposit his check needs to see you personally. Most people don't deposit their checks that way, but
we don't need as many tellers as we needed before.
Right, but there still needs to be
somebody has to do it. Yep.
Somebody still works at the gas station to make sure the pumps are working, that sort of thing.
Right.
So you've got to really think through how technologically sensitive is my job.
Right.
Because there were a lot of jobs that were in the office that are now work from home, and it's working fine because we didn't have Zoom 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
But the risk nobody talks about with these people working from home is, well, so if you can work from home and do your job here. Why can't I hire somebody in New Brunswick at half the wages to do the job? Mm-hmm. Or, for that matter, why can't I hire somebody in Alabama for a quarter of the wages, or somebody in Mexico? And you see where I'm going with this?
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And these are the risks. You got to think through all of the different risks.
Right.
I think the biggest risk from not being in the office is you're not seen.
Yeah, we used to call it FaceTime.
FaceTime.
Yep.
Now FaceTime's an Apple thing or something, I think, or Meta or whatever they call themselves. That's something different, I guess. But, and you and I are employers.
Right.
And, we walk up and down the halls and we see people, oh, how's you? Okay, yep. And so somebody you don't see, we still talk to them on the phone, and obviously we've got reports and metrics and all the rest of it, but
it's not the same.
It's not the same.
Right.
I think the bigger issue, though, is when it comes to training.
Oh, of course.
So you and I both started out as accountants. I guess we're still accountants. They didn't.
Sure we are.
They didn't take our CPAs
We add
away
and
from us.
subtract.
Exactly. And the way you learn is by sitting next to someone, being in client meetings, hearing them on the phone.
Right.
All of our staff here, same thing. We're all, we can hear what's going on.
Yep.
I can shout across to your office and, okay, that's how you handled that situation. That's interesting. Explain it to me a bit more. How did it work? What's all that? If you're remote, it's like, well, I've got to book a Zoom call with you.
Right.
Or pick
trademark service.
Trademark, sorry. Yeah,
some sort of video conference
they
call.
Should be a sponsor of the
we
show.
use Zoom, so
there you go. Or you got a phone, and walking over and seeing that you're not busy, I'll ask you a question, but do I want to phone you?
Right.
You probably experience this all the time. I get a message from one of our people. Have you got a moment to chat?
Right.
Well, my phone is on green.
It says call me.
It says call me. So yes, you can call me, but you still feel like you're intruding a little bit.
That's right.
So I think you're right. You've got to look at both sides of it. But if you've got a horrendous commute and, there are jobs where you can work from home, well, I don't dispute that would be something to be considering.
Yeah, we're not saying never switch jobs. What we're saying is just be careful. If the main reason you're switching jobs right now is because you'd like to get one where you can work from home more frequently.
So all of our employees are watching this because, of course, this is the highlight of their week, watching our...
trying to figure out where our brains are
exactly.
going.
So we, when the pandemic started, everyone got sent home because that was the law. We had no choice.
Yep.
And, so we had to redeploy computers and figure it all out and all the rest of it. Now we have brought people back to the office.
Yep.
And that kind of makes us a little bit hypocritical because I'm sure all of our people would much rather work from home.
Most of them.
Most of them, not all of them.
Yep.
Some of them, in fact, continued to come in during the pandemic. They were in an empty office, but they continued to come in.
Right.
So are we bad bosses for bringing them back to the office when they were able to do their job from home during the pandemic?
Well, so they were able to do most of their job or some of their job. As I don't know how many times we've said this on the show in the last year or so, but insolvency volume, the activity in our industry is down significantly. And that's because CRA is not collecting, the courts weren't fully active. There are lots of reasons. So they've been able to adjust to doing the workflow and workload that they have from home because it's half what it used to be. Well, so you can take this one to the bank, folks. At some point in the next 6 to 18 months, insolvency is going to get ridiculously busy because all of these things, it's a perfect storm coming in. It's going to hit a lot of people very hard. But at that point, it's going to be difficult to manage the workload from home. That's just my opinion. But are we good or bad employers? Our folks, it's a client service industry. You've got to be able to deal with the clients, with the creditors, with the people that have issues. The most efficient way to do that is from the office.
Well, and I think I could disagree with that.
Yep.
But here's two things I can't disagree with. Number one, there are people who want to actually come in and see us.
There are.
And it may be because the way it works now, it's like, okay, well, I need to see all your paperwork. Can you take a picture with your phone and send all those things to me? Because they don't have a scanner at home. They don't have a PDF copy or whatever. So for a bunch of people, it's just easier to say, look, can't I just bring me my creditor statements and everything else?
Well, use my Guelph office as an example. The staff have been home for 2 years, and I haven't required them to come back in. But I'm going there a couple of days a week now because people want to come and meet in person. That's the nature of the job.
Yeah. So the reason you need to be in the office is because people want to come in and see you in our business. If you're in a different business, then obviously it's different. The other fact is that we deal with paper here.
Right. Unfortunately.
Now, we have digitized pretty much everything. In fact, we were the leaders in this.
Right. Back in 2006, we got there before anybody else.
Yeah, 2006 is when we put scanners on everyone's desk, went to dual monitors, the whole bit.
And the world was promised we'd be paperless.
That's right. And the biggest area where we are not paperless is CRA.
Right. The government, either us corresponding with them or them corresponding with us. It's all still paper.
Yeah, I was looking at a proof of claim yesterday because when I do a counseling session, I go through with people how all the creditors have voted in their proposal, and I'm looking at the copy on the screen of the CRA proof of claim, but it had obviously been mailed to us.
Right.
We had stamped it when it was received. There were signatures that were actual ink signatures on it.
And then we scanned it and threw it out.
Right. So it's like, hey, CRA, couldn't you have just scanned it and emailed it to us, which is what most of the other creditors do?
Push a button and send it to us, and then we'll push a button and save it.
But that's not the way it is. Now, of course, they also, when someone goes bankrupt, we have to file tax returns,
right?
Of which most of those are paper.
Right.
So we put them all in a pile and send them out. And CRA will send us refund checks, again, if someone's bankrupt, which is a piece of paper. They don't do electronic fund transfer. When we are distributing funds to creditors, we do it by
check,
which is paper.
Yep.
So there are some very obvious reasons why people have to be in the office. You cannot issue a check from home.
Right.
I'm pretty sure you can't. Maybe there's a way to do it.
Took the check printers home, I suppose they could.
I'm thinking there's a security issue with that probably.
It's hard for me to come to their home and sign it.
And that's the other issue because again, these are requirements as to how we do it.
Right.
So in our business, we are kind of in this in between zone. Yep. There are some things that obviously have to be done in the office. Some things that sure can be done from home. So we are evolving towards a hybrid model where, okay, we've got people in the office when they need to be in the office and we've got some flexibility when they're not. I suspect that's how most employers will end up doing it.
I think most employers that are doing some sort of, I guess it's, how am I going to describe this? The employers that aren't actually making something, so manufacturers, or the employers that aren't providing a direct service to individuals. So I don't know what segment of the population that is, 30%? So they're office jobs, administrative jobs, that sort of thing.
Well, I guess if you're a marketing company and you create digital ads, well, okay, you could be doing that from anywhere.
Yep.
And so, yes, those are the ones that will go, computer programmers. Those are the ones who will go almost entirely virtual.
Yeah, those are your gig economy people.
Right.
And I don't know how much of the economy is these gig people here.
Well, I mean, even if you're a full-time programmer or something, but that can be done remotely.
Right.
But I suspect a lot of them will also still have a facility where you can come in and, socialize and have lunch and actually see other human beings.
Right.
So, okay, final question for you then. What do we see happening with our clients as the cost of living is going up? And I guess more specifically, I guess what we see is more borrowing.
Right. Well, so the typical scenario is this. Your income cannot change overnight, but your expenses can. And so your expenses go up quickly over the short term. You've got to find a way to deal with that. So if you've got room in your budget, which very few people do, then you simply change the way you spend your money. If you've got savings, you use your savings up. You haven't got savings, you incur debt. And the folks that we end up dealing with are always in that last category where they incur debt. Now, going into the pandemic, debt levels were historically high. There's been some retractions. They've retreated a little bit from those levels because people didn't have these expenses. I'm predicting that they're going to go back to those levels within 6 months and then exceed them dramatically. And I think it's just a matter of time before things get really bad for a lot of people.
So what is your advice then? I mean, we get it. We have to fill up our cars with gas as well. Right. You go to the grocery store. And
every person we talk to, we go through a budget with them. So the average individual doesn't look at a budget at all. And you and I look at 10 or 15 of them a day. And so we can see these things because we see it happening every day and we can see the trends. And so, folks, if you're looking for some advice, take the time to figure out how you're spending your money. So, it's an old habit. This is what I have to pay. This is discretionary, so I can change some of this. What have I got left over? I mean, when we did our Joe Debtor study, Joe Debtor had $200 a month left over after paying all of his necessities to service his $50,000 worth of debt. It can't be done. You can juggle for quite a while, and a lot of people are good at it, but eventually you got to deal with that pile of debt.
Yeah, because our typical client is paying well over $1,000 in debt service costs, and if you've only got $200, then it's
got to come from somewhere.
And there is no magic solution to this.
There isn't.
Like, you cannot make the price of gas go down.
Well, you can. If we all stop buying gas, it'll go down. But
Right.
if you don't buy gas, you better have an electric car.
And of course, your hydro bill's going up anyways too.
Yes.
And how do you get to work then?
Right.
If, my shift starts at 5 a.m. at the factory, the bus doesn't start running till 6.
Right.
Like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, we've got lots of clients who work at Amazon warehouses and things like that, which are not right downtown. They're not right on the subway line.
They're out in the boonies because that's the most efficient place for them to be.
So we get it. This is very difficult. So really what you got to do, as you say, is, I mean, I'm not a fan of budgeting, but I am a fan of knowing where your money goes.
Right.
Which I guess is the same thing.
But we don't use the term if it scares you.
Yeah. So, okay, pull out your debit card statement for the last month and take a look at where everything went, and then ask yourself, is there anything that I can possibly cut back on?
Yeah. What can I change?
And the answer might be, well, I got to get a roommate. I got to move to a smaller place. I got to move closer to work. I've got to, figure
I can't
something
stop
out.
at Timmy's every day on the way to work.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Or maybe Timmy's is the one thing that I will keep because that coffee in the morning that's a real important thing to me.
Right.
But here's other places where I'm going to cut back. Get your heart going. So, of course, we have something other than coffee in our mugs here.
Right.
It's water. Water's the answer.
I don't drink coffee.
I know. Yeah, that would make you just
That's
too.
what everybody the world needs me on caffeine.
Be just too crazy. But yeah, we get it. It's tough. We're hoping that the world can get back to some semblance of normal, but you just got to see where you're at right now and take stock and do what you can.
Yeah, the hardest thing to recognize, folks, the hardest part for anybody in dealing, well, this is going to sound like a commercial, in dealing with their debts, is knowing when to talk to somebody outside the home. So if you've got a financial advisor, talk to them. The person at the bank might be helpful. You're probably better off to do a Google search and talk to somebody like you or me. I mean, this is what we do for a living. And the sooner you do it, the more options that you have. The biggest mistake people often make is, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to put my head in the sand and I'm not going to deal with this debt issue because, well, there's no pressure right now. The CRA people aren't at work. The courts are only kind of semi-active. They're coming, folks, and they're coming for you, and it's coming soon.
Yep. So do what you can to get your costs under control now.
Yep.
It's not easy, but it is, and maybe that is looking at other jobs, part-time gigs, whatever. It may be what you need to do. Ted, thank you very much. That is our show for today. So my thoughts, like I said, there are no magic solutions. Costs are up. It's not your fault. I think that's the other key that we got to emphasize here. Like, Don't be too hard on yourself. Of course, costs have gone up. It had nothing to do with you. Everybody else is in the same boat. So, I mean, it is what it is. So I think, as you said, be aware of your spending. You're the boss. You decide where it goes.
Right.
So if you want to buy that coffee on the way to work, fine. Figure out what else you can shift around. Be creative. Can you carpool to work? Can you split the Costco membership with your friends? Whatever. And don't panic.
Right.
We can get through all this. So, and let's hope we do. So
we will.
Ted, thank you very much. Until next week, that is our show for today. Thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes for Ted Michalos. That was Debt Free in 30.